Crossroads Community Church. We are so glad that you decided to check us out. You are invited to visit us in person at 9 or 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings. If you would like to partner with us in our mission to connect others with God, you can visit us on our website at www.crossroads.cc and click on the Online Giving tab. We hope you enjoy this sermon from our most recent service.
All right. You guys excited to be here today? Awesome, yeah. I love seeing the parents wrestle with their kids up on the stage. It's so fun. It's so fun. I remember doing that with both of ours, and eventually they get bigger than you, and you can't wrestle them anymore. But I love that. I love that we're an Orange Church, and I love that you come behind these parents and say, "We're with you. We support you. We're with you." And those were two incredible, great families and beautiful children, right? Beautiful children. Brienne, the mom that was on this side, actually was baptized the last time we had baptism. She came up, was just here at service and just felt like God was calling her to take that step, and she stepped up and got baptized with all of her clothes on. And here she is today dedicating her son to the Lord. What a great thing. So cool. So cool. So we're in a series called I Choose, and what we've been doing in this series is really making decisions that right now in the beginning of the year that can change your entire year. Make 2018 the best year of your entire life. And you know, we are the product of the decisions that we've made in the past, and who we are in the future will be based on the decisions that we make today. And so we want to make these decisions at the beginning of the year just to make sure that we are doing what God has called us to do. Remember the first week we talked about choosing great over good. You remember that? Choosing great over good. And then the second week we talked about choosing the important over the what? The urgent. And then last week, a really tough one, but just so good, was we choose surrender over control. Yeah, that was a hard one. And so I hope that you were challenged through that this week to surrender, not hold on to things and try to control it. Well, today we're going to talk about choosing discipline over regret. Choosing discipline over regret. And I recognize that when I say the word regret, that you probably begin to travel down memory lane a little bit. Start to think about maybe some regrets that you've had in your life, and I believe that you're not alone. Every person in this room has experienced or is experiencing some regrets based off things that have happened in their past, and so you start kind of making this trip through memory lane. And so today's going to be tough, and so kind of to set it up and to make sure that we're all having a good time still, even in the tough things. I went through this idea this week of choosing discipline over regret, and it took me down memory lane, which was a lot of fun because I grew up I was a teenager in the late 80s, early 90s. And there were a lot of fun things happening in the late 80s, early 90s. Some of you were born alive during the 80s and 90s, yeah. How many of you were not even born until after the 80s, like sometime 90s or after? Yeah, a good chunk of you. You guys are so young, and so beautiful. Your hair looks so good. It's not gray yet, and all that. So, yes. So kind of traveling down this memory lane, I got thinking about some of the things that were just a part of the 80s and 90s. Thought about the denim that we used to wear, all kinds of denim and jean jackets. And we used to tight roll our jeans. How many of you did that? Tight rolled your jeans, you flip that thing over like this and then straight up like that, And man, you just walked around all day like that, with your... And that's the way we did it back then. I don't know what we were thinking, but anyway, just different trends for different times. But then I got thinking about one of the other things that kind of represents the 80s and 90s, and it's right here, the mullet. So some of you might have a mullet in the room. Let us all encourage you now. Go cut that thing off this week, okay? Don't keep it. Don't keep it. But I used to have a mullet back then as well. It wasn't that poofy, but it was definitely long in the back and short at the top. And so that kind of reminds me of the 80s. And I think about some of the shows that we used to watch, like Full House. Probably a lot of you like that show, or probably picking up on the a Netflix series that they're doing, Fuller House. Now I watched a little bit of it. It was pretty lame, but maybe you like it. Maybe you like Full House. But remember they used. What did she used to say? You got it, dude. You got it, dude. Cut it out. That's what he used to say. How about this show? You remember this show? Yeah. My wife is in the room, but I watched this show for one reason and one reason only. And her name was Kelly Kapowski. Anybody with me? Anybody with me? Everyone's afraid to raise their hands. All right. How about some songs? I was thinking about some songs of that time. Yeah, probably a lot of you like that. Yeah, I see some fists going like, yes, that's me, you know. Maybe you had the sheets, the curtains, the pillowcases, and everything to go with it. And that's just the guys in the room. The girls did more than that. How about this song that reminds us of the past? Yeah, you remember this one? Yeah, who knows it? Who wants to come up and do it? Like, anyone? No. So people went, no, I know it, but I'm not going to do it. So this song is called Parents Just Don't Understand, and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Actually, every time my son calls me, this is the ringtone. So just to remember that parents just don't understand, right? All right, how about this is the most recognized guitar solo in all of history, I think. Remember this one? All the young people are like, what is this? What is this? But you guys know what this is, right? You know what this is. So, Guns N' Roses, anybody know the song? Sweet Child of Mine, yeah, you know it. You know it. So, that kind of takes us on a little trip down memory lane. It's fun, you know. It's fun to kind of travel back and think about things that have happened in the past. But I would say sometimes too, it's painful to go back through the past. It's painful to kind of step back and remember some of the things that have happened in the past, or maybe some of the things that you wish was different now, some of the regrets that you might have. And so, as you can imagine, being a pastor, I tend to be, I've seen a lot of tough things. I've walked through a lot of heartbreaking things with people, and I think probably one of the most difficult is regrets. I mean, it's those moments when it's the time is over and you say, I wish I would have said this. I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have forgiven. I wish I would have asked for forgiveness. I mean, it's in those in those thoughts that we remember those times. And I've walked through some really tough times with people, and that's why today, right now, I want us all to choose before the end of the day to choose discipline over regret. Discipline over regret. So I'm going to say something that's not a lot of fun. Now that was all fun. So that was all fun. But I'm about to say something that's not fun. Can you handle it? Okay, you guys are tough. I know you can. I want you to know that you're going to experience a lot of pain in this life. You're going to experience a lot of pain in this life. In fact, Jesus tells us that, and part of it is, let's say this part of it is, the reason why we experience pain in this life is because we just live in this completely crazy world. I mean, Jesus himself said, in this world, you'll have what? Trouble. He says this, like, in this world, you're going to have trouble. And a lot of times it's out of your control. It's not your fault. You get into a freak accident. Somebody around you gets sick. Somebody you love betrays you or hurts you, or your company downsizes and you lose your job, or your kids come home with a cute little kitten. I mean, whatever the pain is inside of you, that's like completely out of your control. It's completely out of your control. This week at Crossroads, it's been a tough week for us here. There's been some accidents on the staff. There's been a flood here. So Thursday morning, Teresa, our facility coordinator, walks through the door. It was still dark, usually is when she gets here. And so she was walking through the dark, and she stepped in something squishy and gross. And she called me about 7:15 or so, and she said, she didn't say hello, she didn't say how you doing, she said, we got a major problem. I said, what's going on? Well, the drains at Crossroad had backed up, and everywhere that there's a drain, especially in the low spots, you know what comes out of drains, right? So out comes all of that fun stuff. And so we especially Teresa, worked hard all week to get this place straight today. Thankful for her. By the time she left Thursday night, she was, you're going to applaud again when you hear this, but by the time she left Thursday night, she was covered in poop from her head to her toes. And it's right. She gets another clap for that one. But just appreciate her. But these things happen. It's not in our control, and it's like we're just going to have trouble in this world. We're going to experience different kinds of trouble. We can all agree to that, for sure. But there's also the reality that some of the pain that we experience comes from our own doing, right? It's from things that we've done. And the reality is that we can all choose our pain. And we're going to choose our pain today. We can choose the pain of discipline, or we can choose the pain of regret. Both are painful. Being disciplined is painful. Regret is heart-wrenching and painful. And what are you going to choose? Because you can choose one. You can choose the pain of discipline, or you can choose the pain of regret. For example, you can choose the pain of obeying your parents' kids. It's not easy. Or you can choose the pain of the consequences that come later. The regret. What are you going to choose? Discipline or regret? You can choose the pain of living within your means today. That's difficult. You have to say no to some things. It's painful to live within your means. Or you can choose the pain of regret and trying to dig yourself out of mountains and mountains of debt. You can choose the pain of studying. Are the students in here? You can choose the pain of studying for an exam today. Or you can experience the pain of retaking the class again. You see? I can choose the pain of working out and watching what I eat, and none of that's fun. None of that's fun. It's difficult. Or I can choose the pain of my body falling apart way too early. What are you going to choose? The pain of discipline or the pain of regret? Let me define both of those for you, and then we're going to jump right in to what God has to say to us today through His Word. So here's the definition of regret. Regret is choosing what you want now over what you want most. Does that make sense? Regret is choosing what you want now over what you want most. Discipline then would be what? Choosing what you want now. Choosing what you want most over what you want now. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. It says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win, it says. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away. But we do it for what? An eternal prize. Discipline takes work. Discipline is hard. It's not fun. But I would say that it's more fun than the pain of regret. So let's look at Matthew chapter 25. We're going to kind of nail in here. This is a teaching. The teaching is called the Olivet Discourse. There are 5 different discourses or teachings or sermons of Jesus right here recorded in the book of Matthew. This is the last and final teaching before what we know is the Passion Week, or the week leading up to the death of Jesus Christ. It's called the Olivet Discourse because Jesus is teaching on a mountain, and guess what the mountain's called? The Mount of Olives. Okay, so that's why it's called the Olivet Discourse. These teachings were all about what the end times would be like. And so there's 3 parables here. We're going to talk about the middle one, and starts in verse 14 of Matthew 25. And it says this, again, the kingdom of heaven. So that's kind of how all of those start. So he's showing us, again, these are teaching us what the end times are going to be like. It says, again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted, everybody say entrusted his money to them while he was gone. So the master calls servants together and he entrusts them with his wealth. He gives them each this gift. This idea of entrusting is such an important word to me because parables are stories of life. They're teaching lessons. They're stories that have deeper meaning. And so this word entrust for us, it's an important word because it just screams to me that everything that we have in our possession, God has entrusted those things to us. That they don't belong to us. That He's entrusted to us everything that we have, our home, our money, our car, our spouse, our children, our chairs, this building that we're in, the guitar that's sitting right there, the drums that are over there, the chairs that you're sitting in, the dollar bill that's in your wallet or your purse today. It's all been entrusted to us by the Master, by God. We don't own it, but He entrusts us with it. It also indicates to me that the intention of the Master is to bless and to give. And we are blessed people. Do you believe that? We are blessed people. At least can you give me one amen and maybe a moo somewhere in the background? Like, we are blessed people. We are blessed people. This is the kind of the general blessing of God. You're blessed if you have a pair of shoes on today. You're blessed. If you drove to this place today and didn't have to walk in the 5 miles in the rain, you're blessed. If you have a cover over your head while you're sleeping last night, you're blessed. If you have breakfast yesterday or breakfast, lunch, and dinner yesterday, and you still have some food left in the pantry, you're blessed. If you have cleaning water, to stand in a bathtub or in a shower and let that water run over top of you, over your hair so you can scratch the yuckies out of your hair and your body. You're blessed. If you have water to drink, you are blessed. If you have a friend this morning, you're blessed. If you have heartbeat this morning, you're blessed. This is the general blessing of God. And for those of us who have in the room that have even rejected God, you're blessed because God has continued to allow your heart to beat, even though you've rejected Him. We are blessed people. And so we see this general blessing of God, that He's a good and giving God. And then He goes on to kind of show more specific blessings. It says He gave 5 bags of silver to one. He gave 2 bags of silver to another. And He gave 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities, and then He left on a trip. So one guy gets 5 talents. This is a specific blessing here. One guy gets 5 talents, another gets 2, and then a third gets 1. And maybe you're thinking as we read that you say, that's not fair. It's not fair that God would give this person 5 and this person 2 and this person only gets 1 over here. That just doesn't seem fair to me. Well, I would say I'm glad that God's not fair. I'm glad that God's not fair. He's good, but He's not fair. Because when somebody's fair, then you get what you deserve, right? How many of you would like to get what you deserve? We don't have a fair God. We have a good God who loves us, and He's giving to us. And I'm thankful He's not fair, because if He was fair, then He wouldn't have come to this world and died for me and given me an opportunity to have a relationship with Him, to be spared from hell for eternity. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that. So you have this idea of one person gets 5 and another gets 2 and another gets 1, given to them based on their ability. Again, it's all God's. He entrusts us with this, so it's up to His discretion about who He wants to give to what, and so He gives. And in verse 16 it says, the servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. Some translations say that at once the servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest. At once there was this urgency. The one who had 5 went out and began to invest right away and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also, and this is an important phrase as well, went to work. He knew that he had been entrusted with these 2 bags of silver, and so he went to work, and it says that he earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. So, again, there's this urgency of the first 2. They go out at once, they begin to work, they begin to invest. But this last guy, he takes what he's been entrusted with, and he goes out and he digs a hole and he buries it in the ground and hides it. In verse 19, after a long time, the master returned from his trip and called them all to give an account of how they had used the money. So after some time, the master comes back home unannounced, and he's there now, and he's going to settle the accounts, and everybody stands before the master to give an account for what they've done with that, what they've been entrusted with. And so here are these three standing there, and you might say, well, I don't believe that I'll ever stand before God and give an account. Well, one day you'll believe it. One day you'll believe it. And so here they are giving an account for what they've been entrusted with. And the servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver, and I invested, and I earned 5 more. The master was full of praise, it says, full of praise. And then he says these words, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. Some translations there say, come and share in the master's joy. Come and share in the master's joy. And so there's these 2 rewards. 1, you're entrusted with more, and 2, you get to experience the master's joy, this eternal satisfaction, this permanent place where he is, where you have this eternal happiness. The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more. The master said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount. So now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. So again, the same idea. Well done, my good and faithful servant. There's these 2 rewards. 1, more, entrusted with more, and also 2nd, and join into the master's joy here. You get to be a part of that. And then the 3rd guy is where we're going to spend the rest of our time together today. Because this is where really the fertilizer hits the fan in the parable that Jesus is telling here. Verse 24 says, Then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, Master, I knew you as a harsh man, and harvesting crops you didn't plant, and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid. I would lose your money. So I hid it in the earth. Look, here is your money back. But the master replied, okay, hang on a minute. This is going to be tough to hear. Okay, so everybody just listen. It's not going to be fun to listen to, but just listen anyway. He says, you wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it. Then he ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one with the 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's really tough to read, okay? But what we see in this parable is that all of us have a choice. We have a choice to choose the pain of discipline, to go out and to work hard and to do the best that we can do, or we can choose the pain of regret. I don't want you to choose the pain of regret, and that's why I bring this message to you today. I want us to choose the pain of discipline. So why do so many people have regrets? Well, see if this kind of fits in with maybe how you feel or how I felt in the past. Here's some of the reasons why we have regrets. Number 1, and it comes out of these all 3 come out of this text here. Number 1, we convince ourselves that we'll get to it later. We'll convince ourselves that we'll get to it later. So the servant who receives 5 bags gets to work right away, begins investing. The second, who has 2, begins to invest right away, goes to work and earns 2 more. But the 3rd servant goes and hides the master's money. What jumps out to me, or what I think about in that moment, is that there's this word that I think many of us struggle with, and it's the word procrastination. Anybody struggle with procrastination? Why do we struggle with procrastination? I think the big reason is because we hope that if we procrastinate long enough, it will just go away, right? But it doesn't go away. We hope it goes away, but it never goes away. I think that most of our greatest regrets come from procrastination. And I know that today, that in this room there are many, all of you are really smart people who know exactly what God's called you to do. You know exactly what the next step for you is, and yet we always get to this point where we have to choose, are we going to do this now or are we going to say, I'll get to it later? I'll get to it later. Some of you, it's to begin a relationship with Jesus Christ. He's been seeking after your heart. You're here. You know He's been working in you. You know that this is the step that you need to take, that you need to surrender your life to Him and begin following Him. But yet, we continue to say, I'll do it later. To get baptized. We're going to do that in just a few moments. To get baptized. A lot of us we know that that's the step that we need to take, that we need to publicly say that we follow Jesus Christ. It's this public demonstration of what's happened inside of us inwardly, and we can stand up and say, you know what, I believe in Christ, I identify with Him, and I want the world to know that I'm going to follow Him. And we know that we have to take that step, and here the baptism tub sits today, and we've been talking about baptism over the last few weeks, and many of you know that that's the step you need to take, but yet you say, I'll get to it later. I'll do it a little bit later. Dads, you know you need to step up and be a dad. Moms, be the mom God's called you to be. Husbands or wives, be who God's called you to be. Maybe you know you need to start counseling or start giving or start getting healthy or whatever the case might be. We always come to this place where we say, I'll get to it later. I'll get to it later. But here's the issue. As we read through this parable, the master returns, and do you think they were expecting the master to return? Do you think they knew when he was going to come back? They had no idea. They had no idea. All of a sudden, now they're standing there giving an account to this master of what they've done with what God's entrusted them with, what the master's entrusted them with. And here they stand before this master, not expecting it, unexpected. Here they are now standing in front of the master. And the reality is that we don't know how much time we have left. We don't know how much longer before the master will return and before we have to stand before him and give an account of what he's entrusted us with. We don't know how long we have. In fact, he could show up while we're in this service today. And yet we don't want to say, well, I'll get to it later, because we don't know if we have later in reality. In fact, the truth of the matter is that time is just flying by. Is your time flying by? I mean, we were just at Christmas. Wasn't it just Christmas, and now we're 9 weeks away from Easter? And then it'll be Christmas again, and then Easter, and then Christmas again. It's just the way it goes. It's just the way it goes. Time just flies. I mean, it wasn't long ago that we were standing up at church with our little ones, dedicating our children to the Lord, and now we're getting college letters in the mail. You talk about legacy marbles, ours have really shortened. We don't have a lot of time left with our kids. We don't know. I mean, time is flying. We don't know how much time we actually have. So why continue to say later, 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 later? Second, I would say that another reason why we have regrets is because we're confused about God. We see that here in this passage. I think one of the biggest reasons that we have regrets is because we completely misunderstand who God is. Here in these verses, it says that he believed him to be a harsh man, which is simply not true. We see at the very beginning that he was a giver, that he was good. He simply didn't recognize who God was, the reality of who the master really was. And I don't know if that's ever happened to you before. Has anyone ever been talking to you but didn't really recognize you? You know, my grandmother, great-grandmother, who I just love so much, she lived in Pennsylvania, in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and all there was were cows and pigs and farms and barns and land is all it was. And we would travel out there to see her, and every time we'd see her, and she'd have these really thick glasses. She was a little short thing with thick glasses, and she'd say, "I wouldn't recognize you if I saw you on the streets." She'd say that every time. "I wouldn't recognize you if you have grown so much. I wouldn't recognize you if I saw you on the streets." And then she'd hold out her hand, and we'd put our hand out, and she'd put her hand in our hand, and she'd open it up, and we'd squeeze our hand, and she'd put a dollar bill in our hand. We were kids, you know. "I wouldn't recognize you if I saw you on the streets." You know, I told you this story not too long ago, but I was working out at the gym, and this guy who I knew, and I was convinced that he knew me as well, we just began to have this conversation. I wasn't long into the conversation that I realized that he didn't really know who I was. And so I started to kind of pick up on the cues. And so he starts talking about stuff, and he kind of his pastor was playing basketball over there. He said, "That's my pastor over there playing basketball." I said, "Oh, that's cool." At that point, I thought he still knew who I was. And then he just starts bad-mouthing the guy. And just saying, he's a good preacher and everything, but, he doesn't know how to relate to people, and I'm just kind of hoping he'll leave. He doesn't know how to lead well. I'm just kind of hoping he'll leave. And I'm starting to pick up, like, this guy I don't think he knows who I am. And then he says, "Well, how are things at the sheriff's office?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't know. I haven't been to the sheriff's office in a long time. I'm not sure how things are there, And I'm like, "I think you got me confused with somebody else." And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, "It's okay. I don't like my pastor either. He's not that great." But he's like, "Well," and I'm thinking to myself, why would you talk so bad about somebody, your pastor? Why would you talk so bad about him like that? And then he's like, "Well, what is your name, Aaron? Well, what do you do?" "I'm the pastor at Crossroads Community Church." And he just like, oh, it was just like red all the way up, And I don't know if you've ever had that moment with somebody where they just didn't recognize you or you didn't recognize them. But, we have we see in the story that this parable that he didn't recognize who who the master really was, that he was good and he was a giver. And I keep thinking, why do we misunderstand God so much? Well, probably because there's been a lot of bad teaching, but I think probably another big piece of it, and I think I can put my finger on it a little bit, is just to think that there are so many dads out there that have just completely blown it. And we look at God as a father, and so we automatically think that God is a father, and so we put those characteristics on that are our earthly father onto God our Father, and we say, here's this God who's my Father. I've been abandoned, and so this Father is going to abandon me too. And we know that we have a God who says He'll never leave us or forsake us, but yet we misunderstand God because of, I think, what we've experienced in this life, or we see God as apathetic, that He doesn't really care about us, that He doesn't really love us, even though we can see completely the opposite of that He loved us so much that He sent His Son. He put on flesh and came to this world and died for us. Like, we see that. He's not apathetic towards us, or abusive maybe. Maybe your father was abusive towards you, and so every time you do something bad, you think, God's going to punish me for that. We have all this misunderstanding about who God really is, and yet we have a God who is a heavenly Father, who's good, who's a giver, who loves us, who is sinless and perfect and holy, and he loves His children. He would do anything for His children. In fact, I, as a father, earthly father, I would do anything for my kids. If anybody goes after my kids or tries to hurt my kids, they're gonna face some wrath. Like, I'm going to take them out. Don't touch my kids. Don't hurt my kids. We have a God who would go to your defense, who loves you that much. And so I think we oftentimes can misunderstand who God is, and I think some of our biggest regrets come from the fact that we're just confused about who God is. And I believe that once we know who He is, it's easy for us to submit to Him and to give our life to Him. But if we don't understand who He is, then it's more difficult for us to submit our life to Him. And third, I would say that we're crippled with fear. We're crippled with fear. What fears us controls us. What fears us controls us. Whatever it is for you, I know some of you, like if a spider came crawling on this carpet right now, you'd be up and out of here without even questioning it. You'd be up and gone and screaming. Like whatever fears us, whatever we're afraid of controls us, whether it's elevators or storms or bugs or whatever. And for me, I haven't shared this with you guys in a long time, but for me it was clowns, and still is clowns, or really anything that's dressed up kind of freaks me out, So things like that can stay off to the side. Even if I'm at Chick-fil-A, and the cow starts coming towards me, I start backing up and like, get that thing away from me. I do not want that thing coming close to me, because it controls me, it controls me. And I bet somebody in this room's thinking right now, wouldn't it be funny? Wouldn't it be funny? Well, if you're ready to meet Jesus face to face and give an account of what you, go ahead and try it. Try it. If you're ready for that. But, well, Matthew 25 says, he says, I was afraid. I was afraid I'd lose your money, so I hid it under the earth, and look, here's your money back. And what are you afraid of? What is that fear? Maybe it's the fear of, what will my spouse think? What will my family think? I don't really want to have that conversation with that person because I'm afraid of what that conversation might look like. I'm afraid to surrender this. Maybe it's your giving to the church. I'm afraid to surrender that over to the Lord because we need it. We're fearful in those moments. And so we all have those kinds of fears. Well, as you know, things didn't turn out well for the third servant. And it says, now throw this useless servant into outer darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And I could probably preach a whole sermon on that verse. And I don't think we can walk away with maybe some confusion about that verse. Do I think that verse means that if God entrusts you with your children and you blow it, that you're going to go to hell? No. In fact, it's dangerous to take an isolated verse out of the Bible and then build a whole theology out of it. Like take the whole Bible and then build your theology off of that. But the truth is, and what we can't deny, is that this servant regretted not investing what he was entrusted with. We can't deny that. We can't deny that he wasted what God had given him. We can't deny that. What we can't deny is that he wanted what he wanted now more than what he wanted most. We can't deny that. What we can't deny is that he chose the pain of regret over the pain of discipline. And so, kind of in closing, as worship team comes, I want us to choose now discipline, the pain of discipline over the pain of regret. And so if you picked up a worship guide, or if you've got your app notes open, or just grab a piece of paper and the pen in front of you, use the connection card, use the envelope, or whatever you have, and write this down. Write this down. What do I want most? What do I want most? Just write it down. What do I want most? Maybe you need to think about it through the rest of the day. That's all right. Take some time. But write it down. What do I want most? What do I want most? And then second, what do I need to do now to achieve what I want most? What do I need to do now? Write it down. What do I want now? What do I need to do now to achieve what I want most? What do I want now? Gosh. I'm telling you, I'm choosing right now. I'm choosing right now to not be a dad who looks back and says, I wasted time with my kids. I choose not to do that. I choose not to do that. I choose right now not to be a husband who says, I was too busy, and now my wife feels unimportant. I choose right now. Like, I'm making that choice right now. I choose right now. I choose right now to forgive those who have hurt me. I choose right now to speak to those and ask for forgiveness for those that I potentially could have hurt. I choose right now that I'm not going to be the man who ends up at the end of his life looking back and saying, I wish I would have. You see, I face those moments with people all the time at funerals. People say, I wish I would have said, I wish I would have done, I wish I wouldn't have done, I wish I wouldn't have said. I choose right now. I choose. We're going to talk about this in our next series. I choose right now to not give myself to an addiction of pornography because I don't want my wife to feel like she's worthless. I choose right now. Right now. I choose what I want most. What I want most over what I want now. I choose the pain of discipline over the pain of regret. Anybody else want to make those choices today? You want to make some choices? What do you want? What do you want most? What do you need to do right now to get there, to achieve it? What do you want most? Would you pray with me and just take a moment just to let God speak to you in this moment? And God, we pray, Holy Spirit, that you would do a life-changing work in our hearts, God, that you would transform and renew our minds, God. God, that we would be able to see the things that we really want most. What is it that you want most? What is it that you want most? Maybe you wrote it down. Maybe it's in your head. What is it? And let's just bring it to God right now. Let's just bring it to him and say, we're gonna choose the pain of discipline over the pain of regrets, and this is what we want most. And so this is what I need to do right now to see that through. And so whatever it is for you, what it is that you want most, would you just bring it to God right now? Would you just say it out loud to him? What do you want most? Just say it right where you're at. Just speak it. What do you want most? Just let the words come out of your mouth. What do you want most? God, you've heard the cry of our heart, the prayers. We lift them to you, God. And God, we thank you that we know that even in those moments where we have the deepest regrets, things that we can't fix now, that no matter how dark, no matter how messed up, that when we call out to you, God, that you hear our prayers, God, that you will forgive, that you will make us new, God, that you will change our hearts, God, that you will give us a fresh start. And so, God, we give those things to you. We give our life to you. We give complete control to you, God. We thank you for your love for us. We thank you that you are good and that you are a giver. God, thank you for entrusting us with all that we have. And God, what are we going to do with it? We want to do things that please you and honor you, God. This morning as we close with this song, God, we've got two that are coming to be baptized this morning who are ready to take that step. And I would say to anybody else in the room that if this is kind of one of those moments where it's like, well, I don't want to put this off. Like, I want to do this now. I don't want to do this later. I want to do it now. Then I invite you to come on with us. We've got clothes for you to change into. We got stuff. We got everything you need. Hair stuff and deodorant and clothes and underwear. We've got it all for you. So you come if God calls you. This is one of those moments where it's like, I'm not going to wait till later. I'm going to do it now. Stand up and say, I'm with Jesus. Then you come now and do that with us. I'm gonna step aside and just change real quick, and then we're gonna baptize those two that have come. And if there's any others, come on, we're ready for you this morning. God, thank you. Thank you for chasing us. Thank you for seeking after us. Thank you for pushing through anything for us, God, that you love us. You even forgive us of our regrets. Thank you for the new life that we see even this morning here. In Jesus' name, amen.